There we go. All right, this is Hunter Adams. He's a filmmaker living in Los Angeles. He's got a feature out now in the festival circuit. I'm going to let you talk more about yourself, but you're originally from the Wisconsin area. The people behind me and around me are our class, and the class is comprised of director candidates, producer candidates, writer candidates, people who want to do all different facets of the film business, and and we're very pleased to be able to have you. The question arose, is there somebody who kind of is from our background, who's doing what we want to do, who's currently, making it happen? So say hi, Hunter.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here, Rex and Shan.
Now, Hunter and I were recently on a panel too, up at the Wildwood Film Festival in Appleton this past weekend, where he also screened his new feature, a disturbing horror film called Dig Two Graves.
Yeah, I would say it's a little more of a thriller than a horror. It has some horror.
I apologize.
Yeah, but it's kind of a gothic thriller mystery. A young girl becomes obsessed with her brother's disappearance and is given a proposition to bring him back. That's kind of morally ambiguous. So the film traces her wrestling with this morally ambiguous decision. But it stars Ted Levine, who is a horror icon, played Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs.
Fair enough. Students say hello, and of course do the hands up if it's okay to videotape you.
Hello.
All right. Excellent. So the question arose is okay, you're pursuing your dream, you're making stuff happen, you're living in Hollywood, you moved from the Midwest to Hollywood. Can you give us a little bit of a background? And then I'm going to have students ask questions. But could you give us a little bit of a background of how you decided to move west, and then the kinds of things that you needed, the ducks you had to have in a row in order to be able to do what you're now doing? You had to get an apartment, you had to connect up, you had to get a job, those kinds of things. So what do they need to know if they're going to move west or east, for that matter?
Mm-hmm. I guess it depends a little bit on what specifically you want to do. For me, the goal was write and direct. And so when I went to Madison, when I got done there, I made a couple of shorts, and then I made a feature back in Wisconsin with a lot of crew that I'd met in Milwaukee because I was a PA there. I came up with like Frankie Latina, that kind of era. And so I shot a real low-budget film up in northeast Wisconsin called The Hungry Bull. It was a dark comedy about an alcoholic ice cream man. And then from there, I got a job on a shitty movie called Public Enemies.
Now, be careful. This does go out to the world.
Okay.
And we may have children watching.
All right. Anyway, I was on that for 6 months or something, and I moved down to Chicago, and I met a lot of people on that who were also sort of PAs but had aspirations to do other things. And specifically, one of the other PAs, his name was PJ Fishwick. We became pretty good friends, and he ended up producing Dig Two Graves. But I made a bunch of money on that, and then just packed up the car and drove west. And then, just started making phone calls, looking for work, looking for an apartment. It's just a constant hustle out here. But kept in touch with a lot of the people that I had met or on Public Enemies, and then just started meeting new people out here. The one nice thing about LA is there's a lot of people out here, a lot of people in the industry who are hungry to work, and they'll do stuff for free or cheap just to get the experience. So I was able to start to surround myself with really talented people and just sort of started to crank out projects together. And I think that was the biggest thing, is just you got to keep working nonstop, never stop working. And I was able to then have a crew, and when I was ready to dig Two Graves, they were willing and able to go through it with me.
Awesome. Let me back you up a bit and go. You made some money off of doing your PA. You moved west. How'd you find where you lived? How'd you find an apartment? Did you know anybody? Did you use Craigslist? I mean, how did you use a renter's guide? What?
Yeah. Well, I had a friend that lived out here, and he had a friend who was traveling for a few months, so I subleased his apartment. And then once I was here, I just sort of explored the area until I found it, was suitable for my taste. And then Craigslist after that.
What are some of the necessities? What you moved from the Midwest to LA, and LA is a vast, large, complex, traffic jammed landscape filled with mountains and water, oceans and industry and non-industry. And any shocks or surprises or anything that you think people ought to know in advance of moving out there, just on the basic necessity side of life, and then also on the filmmaking side of life?
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive out here. It's not, as expensive as like New York, for example. But I think if you can line up a job ahead of time, that's the ideal way to do it. But start to network with people before you head out there. It's a lot harder to show up. But if you can start to kind of create a dialogue with some people, because it is all about networking out here. It's such a cliche, but every job I've ever gotten has been through word of mouth, or I knew somebody, friend of a friend kind of thing.
So even though there are announcements and boards and pay for subscriptions for jobs and Craigslist, most everything you get is through someone.
I think everything I've ever gotten has been through someone. Yeah.
Fair enough. What about cars and layering your clothing and keeping your trunk full?
I'd get a bicycle.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Because, traffic is just brutal around here, obviously. But I actually ride my bike quite a bit.
Do you?
There's ways to avoid traffic, but it's a brutal reality.
Well, I think, having come from there and having still my 1 foot there and 1 foot here, there are lots of ways to avoid traffic. You just have to know the routes and that. But I always tell people, you need a car, you need a vehicle, you need some mode of transportation. The bus system and the trains have gotten far better than they were when I was a teenager.
Right.
But
you can get around, especially if you don't have to be somewhere at a very exact time. It will get you there eventually.
Right. But think in terms of having a car and then gas expenses. Think in terms of having a place to live and living expenses. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I don't know about you, but when I lived there, everybody's trunk was filled with changes of clothing because the climate, it's cooler at night and warmer in the day. And, if you're a professional and somebody calls you up, if you're an actor, and they say, hey, we need you for an audition tomorrow, or you suddenly get called in, for a writer's meeting or something, you may be far from home.
True. Very true.
So you have like your little pack, your makeup, your clothes, your resumes, everything you need in the car. Cool.
Yeah.
What else? So where do you hang out? Where do you meet writers and directors and producers and actors and Coffee Bean? Starbucks?
Well, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
This is LA, for God's sake. You can't avoid them.
You can't throw a dart without hitting someone in the industry.
Most likely. But one thing that I found is there's a couple of cinematechs in town. One's called the Cine Family, and they show a lot of repertory cinema. They show some new stuff that's not getting any other play in LA. They show some silent movies. It's a pretty vast spectrum of what they show, but a lot of writers, directors, and just film enthusiasts hang out there. And they have it's a subscription-based thing where you buy a membership. It's like $25 a month. You can see everything for free after that. So it's a pretty good deal. And it's actually a great way to meet, to connect with other filmmakers, because that's where they're hanging out. And then Tarantino's got a theater called the New Beverly. That's a great one. He only shows film prints. And then there's the American Cinematheque, of course. the Egyptian Theater and the Aero, and those are both great too. So I think if you're trying to really meet other filmmakers who are, up and coming, those are the kind of places to go. Those where the cinephiles hang out.
I was 18 years old. I mean, I say this, but I was an usher at the Egyptian Cinema, the theater,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a very fond place in my heart for both the major theater, which is very different today, and then the back behind the theater they had two little theaters as well. So
Yeah, it's great. And the Cinematheque also has seminars every month.
exactly.
Filmmaker seminars, and those are fantastic. Those. They do one is called Navigating the Film Festival World, and they go through what you can expect when you're submitting your film, what festivals you should apply to, what festivals you should avoid. It's really beneficial.
I'm going to draw a comparison. When I was 18, 19, I mean, even up until, say, 10 or 15 years ago, maybe more recent than that, too. The difference between now and then was we had payphones, we got answering machines or answering services, and then ultimately we got remote answering devices where you'd beat your cell phone or your telephone at home from a payphone, or you'd call your answering thing, but you'd have to get off the highway in the middle of traffic sometimes to do that. And if there was an event or something that occurred, you didn't know about it till the next day in the trades. There were casting sheets like Dramalog and different things that would come out weekly. The Dramalog started as a folded piece of colored 8.5 by 11 paper that was just printed on both sides with auditions for actors, mostly non-union stuff and a couple union things, and later grew to a glossy 25-page magazine or something like Variety and Reporter were at that time. They cost $1, and they cost $0.25 at one time. Then they went to 50 cents, and they became $1. The trades, but every day as an actor, writer, director, you got your trades, you read the copy to find out who was doing what, why they were doing it, what was new, what failed, who died. All the industry information was available in the trades, and you got it each morning. And then there was no Starbucks at the time. There were none of these. Very few chains, but there were very well-known actor, filmmaker hangouts that people would go to, whether it was Schwab's or Nate Nell's or Jerry's or Ben Frank's or something like that. But the point is today you got Facebook, you got Twitter, you've got all sorts of social media that if something is happening instantaneously, you can find out about it. Somebody can text you and say, "Hey, Brad Pitt just walked into Starbucks. I'm here on such and you would, you know what I mean?" So there are opportunities for people to network together to find out about free events or low-cost events that are happening all over the town all of the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So other ways of networking, I'm going to open the questions up in just a second, but there are a lot of things that people can take advantage of almost every day or every evening or every weekend where there's some free informational meeting or writers group or directors group or actors group or film showing or something, symposiums to further your networking and further your education.
Yeah, and I think the key too is you want to is either join up with a collective of some sort or just rally together with some other filmmakers and make films together. That's really the key these days. Is you have to have a group of people that you can rely upon, because it's really hard to do it by yourself anymore. Even though the technology is there, it's so much work, and it won't be nearly as good as if you're working with other talented people.
Excellent point. All right, so questions from you guys or comments?
What's the class? I'm just curious.
Class is inside the film business, and it's made up of directors and producers and writers and editors and animators, people who want to be. But it's essentially, how do you connect up? How do you get ahead in the business? So we talk to people like yourself who are making things happen and try and find out different ways to connect, what's important, what to do, what not to do when someone's trying to advance their film career in whatever area they may be interested. I would say most people here have that hyphenate goal of either writing and directing, or writing and producing, or producing and directing and editing, or shooting and directing, and that can.
You kind of have to be multi-hyphenated these days.
Today, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So questions? Yes.
Hey, I have a question.
Your name?
What?
Say your name. So.
Oh, my name is Vu. That's VU.
Nice to meet you, Boo.
My question is, do we usually get paid for doing like PA or craft services? And if we do, how long would I be able to live over there just doing that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're PAing on a commercial or any type, a TV show, any type of studio project, you're definitely gonna get paid. If you're doing some low budget indie thing, then usually you still get paid. I mean, I've never done a project where no one got paid. So if you're just, I mean, you can survive as a PA out here. I did for many years. If you're constantly working, I would say, depending on where you're living. I mean, I have friends that have apartments. They pay $500 a month, up to $1,000 a month, depending on, but it's that sort of thing. If you're in a house, so a typical PA gig out here is going to be, minimum $200 a day, or if you're like on a commercial, it's probably closer to like $250. So.
And you say it would be like a stable job, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you can get locked into like a TV show or something that's, yeah.
All right.
Well, not every job is a job with longevity. Some are many. They're one-offs. You get a commercial and you're gone. You get a feature and you're gone. As Hunter was saying, if you can get a TV show or if you can get with a company that uses you reliably, I think the bottom line is you still got to hustle no matter what. But there is something that I wanted to point out. You said there were people who had lower rents, $500 or $1,000. The question becomes: some people can find that inside the city, and some people have to go way outside the city. They're down in Anaheim or something like that. You got to kind of figure out, if you're going to pursue something, how far out you can live and get into town reliably. You can't live 2 hours away and try and get to the set every morning at 6 a.m. Or what's the traffic like? So there's considerations. You just like if you lived in Manhattan, you'd have to figure out your train routes and how long it takes you to get to wherever you needed to go. But where are these people finding these incredible rents?
I mean, there's a lot of neighborhoods in LA that that are cheaper, that aren't too far out. It's constantly changing. It's because the areas that used to be cheap are now getting more expensive because obviously more and more younger people are moving there. But if you can find the neighborhoods that haven't been overrun with the hipsters yet, that's where you want to get to for cheap rent.
When you moved there, did you move out there blind, or did you take a test run out there and then come back out, or how did you get out?
I dove in head first. I'd never been out here before. So, yeah, I just packed up the truck and drove.
How was it to hit those LA freeway systems?
And that was a bit of a shock. It was like simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. You kind of coming over those mountains and then a sea of lights.
It is. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just even learning to drive. I mean, if you brought up in it, you're used to riding in it. But if you've never been brought up in it, and suddenly like if you drove into Hollywood for the first time and you went from having a 2-lane highway to 8-lane highways that are filled with cars going 90 miles an hour. I mean, it's a different kind of driving.
Yeah, for sure. And on the PA question, we shot Dig Two Graves in Southern Illinois, and we ended up getting a bunch of students from SIU, Southern Illinois University, to work on the movie, and that was their first kind of big movie experience. And as soon as it was done, pretty much everybody that was on the movie packed up and moved out to LA. and they've been out here ever since, working and surviving. I saw a couple of them last weekend.
And you shot the movie when?
We shot the movie in 2013.
To what?
2013.
213. So, pretty cool.
They've been out here for a year and a half or so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good question. What other questions? Grant.
Hi, my name is Grant.
Hey, Grant.
My question is about your first feature, actually, and just challenges you faced making your first feature and just unforeseen things that you could have never expected that you have learned from and then applied to your latest feature.
Yeah. Well, it was extremely low budget, and for me it was kind of my film school. So you're learning in the process. But I mean everything that could possibly go wrong tends to go wrong on these things. So the key is you just have to push through it somehow. I think just having gone through the entire process of making the movie, I felt confident that I could go through it again on the next feature, which was significantly bigger. I think that's what it's more. It's mostly just a sense of confidence and understanding that as bad as it feels at the moment, you're going to get through it, and you will finish the film. And I think if I hadn't had that from the first film, I probably would have completely unraveled on Dig 2 Graves. It was a very brutal shoot. I was watching last night. I stopped off at the Cinefamily and I saw a documentary called Lost Souls. Have you heard of this? It's the making of the unmaking, essentially, of Richard Stanley, who made Island of Dr. Moreau, Marlon Brando, and what's his face? Val Kilmer. Any of you guys seen that movie?
Yes, some have. That's
it's kind of considered one of the worst movies.
Yes, indeed.
But the film sort of documents how Richard Stanley sort of got in over his head, and eventually the studio took the project away from him, and he ended up sneaking back onto set as an extra, just to sort of watch what was happening. But I mean, the point it kind of hammers home is that there's so much more to directing a film than just having a vision, being creative, being intelligent. There's so many other factors that play into it. Most specifically, you're leading this massive machine, and it can easily sort of unravel, and it's you really got to. It's about leadership more than anything else. You have to be able to lead this team.
I think that's an excellent point. I have maintained that it's really no different than crossing the Atlantic in a ship. You've got a crew, and hopefully they're all rowing in the same direction and pulling sails, and you've got everybody. But if the leadership, if the director and his team or her team don't exemplify what you want from the top to the bottom, if they don't motivate from the top down, you can have a mutiny.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and that's where having that experience of going through the first feature helped me, because even when things got really kind of out of control, I knew that eventually the ship would steer itself right, and you have to kind of have that patience and just that faith that things are going to work out, because you have to be, no matter what's happening, you have to be cool as a cucumber if you're the director. The most important thing is making sure the actors feel comfortable and have no idea that all hell is breaking loose off camera.
Yeah, in The Wizard of Oz, everything is going wrong behind the curtain.
Right.
Right. And the job of the director and the producers are to keep everybody from knowing that there's total, utter chaos and confusion going on, and you have no clue how you're going to get through it, but that you do manage. And what you said, that's again, it's that 99% attitude and that 1% skill. You have to have the skill, but that cool cucumber, that attitude, that faith, are the things that get you through the toughest moments, probably more than anything else.
For sure, yeah.
Excellent points.
And I think too, like especially if you can afford to do it, like don't be afraid to fire people.
Right.
Like it can be tough to do, but one bad seed can really spoil everything. So, it's a business. It's nothing personal. My recommendation is if somebody's not working out, cut them loose early, replace them, move on.
That's a great point, and also for the people here, realize that you are replaceable too, as a PA or as a cinematographer or as a director. I mean, you can be fired too. So try and make yourself indispensable and valuable, and make sure you're a team player and you're helping create the vision that is the director's vision and the producer's vision. You're all making the same move. Don't grumble and complain. Don't be the person who's caught, at lunchtime going, this director doesn't know crap. Because you are replaceable. I always, again, another like aphorism, but a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So don't be the weak link. And if you find a weak link and you're in the position of authority, you get rid of the weak link. You cut it out.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Excellent. What else? Who else? Yes.
My name is Steven. I was wondering that, do you own a company now? If so, how has it been going, and do you have troubles or triumphs? Or are you just like a freelance filmmaker?
Yeah, I'm freelance, but when you make a movie, you create a company for that movie, an LLC, so that you and the other people involved are protected legally. So when I made The Hungry Bull, I created an LLC around that, and then for Dig Two Graves, the same sort of thing. But for me personally, yeah, I mean, I'm a freelance filmmaker.
So what does that mean to be a freelance filmmaker living in LA?
Means you don't know where the next paycheck is coming from. So
You can pick up at any time and work anywhere in the world or film anywhere you want. You're not held down to any contract.
right, yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
It's a very good way of looking at it, actually. I'm free to do what I want.
Optimistic way.
That is yeah, and that's true about most people. I mean, unless you get a job as a studio grip or makeup artist or cinematographer or something like that, you will find I should say many people are freelancers. Unlike what you and I were talking about, the old factory days of the studio system and how with job security, and now it's a very different.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really lament the loss of the studio system.
I think it's time to bring it back. I still think it is completely doable. Maybe my optimistic naivety, but I think if you figure out a way to pay. I mean, Coppola tried with Zoetrope Studios, and they ended up going under. But the idea is to create a good product like you would a manufacturing plant and pay people the wage to make it. And if you could make cars, if you could make soap, if you could make shoes, if you could make any product, I don't know why you couldn't factory make movies as a studio and pay people that way.
I guess TV's a little bit that way.
It is, yeah.
Like HBO is maybe the closest, in the sense that they use a lot of the same actors in their shows, same directors. So.
Very cool. Who else? What else? Ryan?
How steady is work for like somebody who's new to being a PA? Like, how easy is it to get a job, and like how to get a recurring job? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work out here.
Yeah.
Especially you always need PAs. I would say getting a PA job isn't that difficult. It's sort of moving up the ladder from there that can be more of a challenge. But if you're willing and able to do PA work, you should be able to get plenty for the most part. If you're good at meeting people and staying in touch with people, you'll be fine. I would say the key is meet like the production coordinators, befriend production coordinators because they're the ones that are going to be hiring you. It's not the producers or the directors. You know, it's the production manager, production coordinator,
Line
CPA,
producers,
people like that. Yeah, because they're going to go from job to job, and you know they're going to hire people. You know, every job. So if you can get in with them, then you should be pretty good.
Yeah, everybody, I mean, actors, casting directors have people, their go-to people. They have those reliable talent that they know if a director is in need, that they can send this woman or this man or this boy or this girl to them, and that they reliably deliver a performance. They may or may not get the job, but they are reliable, and they look to have a large number of these people that they can count on and rely on. And the same thing is with line producers, production managers, and coordinators. They look for qualified crew people that they can bring from job to job or from locale to locale. I mean, because there's nothing. If every time you went out you had to hire from scratch, it would drive you nuts. So the better connected you are to the people who are hiring, the more you make yourself indispensable and valuable, the more likely you're going to work a lot.
And you know, Wisconsin people have a really good reputation out here. If they find out you're from Wisconsin, you know, that can help in getting hired as well, because they know that you know we're hard workers.
Right.
And there's a group out here that called like the something Badgers.
Hollywood Badgers.
Hollywood Badgers, I believe. Yeah, you're familiar with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great resource to get connected with. They get together and watch, you know, all the Badger games together, and you know, hire each other for different gigs. So that's a great way if you're looking for work. Just go to one of these, you know, Badger events.
Yeah, and they're Packer bars. Yeah, they're Packer and Badger, but the Hollywood Badgers, you can find them online.
Yeah,
and you can join. You can be a member.
they have monthly events that you can check out.
Who else? What else?
Question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alex.
Hey, Alex.
I was wondering, you said that you create like a limited liability company for your independent projects. How would one go about setting up an LLC as far as like getting attorneys go or sign legal paperwork or anything? How would you make an LLC for an independent film?
So you only want to do it for a feature. You wouldn't do it for a short. At least I never have. And you can do it. You can do it online yourself. For the Hungry Bull, the first feature I made, I did it all myself. And I set it up in Wisconsin. For Dig Two Graves, I had a lawyer do most of it, and we set it up in Delaware for some reason.
There's there's different advantages and more protections in Delaware than there are in other states.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I think Delaware has got some really crazy, awesome laws for loans. Like if you're gonna be giving or taking loans, it's really great for that. So,
Delaware?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear what he said?
They're good at giving loans.
Yeah.
Delaware is some great stuff.
Loans and credit, lines of credit.
Okay. And I think it's something to do with maybe the tax structure there.
Right.
They had a lower corporate tax or something. So I know, yeah, a lot of companies set up in Delaware. But for that, yeah, I hired a lawyer to basically set that up for me.
Well, so along those lines, let's begin there. So you had to get an attorney in order to set up your LLC. How did you get the money to get the attorney to set up your LLC? Did you find investors first? Did you take your cash out of pocket?
Well, we didn't set up the LLC until we had pretty much most of the financing in place for the film.
And this is also something that is a good, wise standard practice. You don't have to rush out and create an LLC, because
Right.
investors know that when they come to take their money, if you've got escrow and accounts, all that stuff goes. Then you can set. Anyway, go ahead, explain.
Yeah, and that stuff happens pretty fast. But there's really no point in going in paying for that, going through that whole process until you know the film is a green light.
Otherwise, you got an LLC and nothing to show for it.
Yeah,
Good point.
right. And then what else was the question?
Essentially, to go through your process of how you got your movie going.
Yeah.
The first
well,
steps.
So what I did was I submitted the script to a program at IFP in New York, which is the Independent Filmmaker Project, and the script was accepted into their, it's called the Emerging Storytellers Program.
Does it sound
and,
familiar?
It's if you guys aren't familiar with IFP, I highly recommend it. You can check it out online. They have several different programs at various stages of the filmmaking process, from the script writing to post production. But they have something called Film Week every year in New York. It's sometime in September, where the entire independent film industry converges, and they sort of take meetings with up-and-coming filmmakers. So through the program, I was set up with these meetings with producers, lawyers, agents, managers, casting directors, etc. And through one of these meetings, I met a lawyer, and he liked the project, and so he kind of took us on more as an investment in the future. And he's like, okay, I like these guys. I'm going to help them out now because they could, be a potentially good client down the road. So that's how I got attached to this guy, and he ended up being pretty integral throughout the process. You can get a really good lawyer because they have, pretty strong connections. He's how we got Ted Levine. In fact, he knew Ted Levine's manager and contacted him for it. And through the IFP, actually through this lawyer, he introduced us to some investors that he had worked with over the years, and that's how we were able to get the financing in place. So I think if you can, it's a huge benefit if you can get an organization like IFP behind the project. It's because it validates the project, and it'll open doors to people that probably otherwise you wouldn't have access to. Like this lawyer. If I had just cold called this lawyer, I would have gotten nowhere.
That's excellent. I had turned and said, does this sound familiar? Because the other day we had Jana Spencer on, who was talking about the importance of fellowships and different programs like this that are great for people to gain entry into the industry, because they're set up to do just that. So,
and Sundance is another big one. Sundance Institute, they've got a screenwriting lab. The Hamptons has a really great screenwriter lab. There's on the West Coast, there's something called Film Independent. They have a lot of different programs. IFP in New York. There's the Nichols Fellowship Screenwriting Program. So there's a bunch out there. And like I said, I think more than anything, it just gives the project validation, so that when you go to a producer, you go to a casting director or an actor, it's more doors are going to open up for you because of that.
That's very, very, very excellent. Now, I want to say, I hear this from writers all the time, directors, producers. They say, hey, I had my script out there, and and everybody loves it, but it doesn't get made. They go, oh, it's a great script, but it's not for us. It's a great script, it's not for us. I'm always of the opinion that if that's the case, it's not that great a script, and that people are passing, like Hollywood Hollywood's always afraid to say, Hollywood's afraid to say no. So, they never say, oh, it sucks and we don't want it too often. They will say, yeah, great, good luck, but we can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that, because Dig Two Graves has had so many rejections.
Oh, no, yes, but hold on. The point I'm making is there are plenty of rejections, but there's oftentimes people will use the rejections to say, I've got a great script, but it's not going anywhere because everybody's rejecting it. What you did was you sent it somewhere where it was independently validated, and it brought you attention and it brought you heat because you got it into a vehicle that enabled that entire process to go ahead. You didn't just sit back and take the rejections and think, I've got a great script, but nobody wants it.
Right, right. And you know, but even with the IFP validation, I mean, it was
Oh,
rejection after rejection, and
Yep.
the biggest reason we got was they said the script is not execution proof, whatever the hell that means. I guess essentially it means that what they're looking for are sort of these high concept
Right.
genre films that are sort of foolproof, like you
Right.
can't screw them up somehow. I don't know how that's possible, but that was at least the line of argument. Dig Two Graves was there were 2 periods. There was also a lot. There was a lot. It was a very ambitious project, and so I think people were reluctant to get behind it with me as an unproven director.
Well, and that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
but when you say 2 periods, you mean 2 time periods, and then also
It's
you had an animal and a child, and
children.
you did everything wrong,
I did it all wrong.
but you made it work. That's very cool.
So yeah, you gotta take that rejection. You sort of have to brush it off because it affects you. But you can't let it stop you. It's the same thing with festivals. We've submitted to many festivals. We've gotten into some, we haven't into others, and I'm not really sure the rhyme or reason of that. But if you're going to be a filmmaker, you got to just prepare yourself for a constant, unending rejection. Just know that that's the way it is. And you have to just sort of tough it out.
It truly is. When American Idol first started, I was a huge fan of that show because I was like, here's what people never get to see or experience unless they're in that business. And that is you audition, and people go, nah, nope. Or, yes, you've got some chops, but nope. And I loved it. The first few seasons, I was like, wow, this is truly valuable. And then what happened is everybody thought, well, I can get on American Idol and become an overnight success, and it kind of defeated the purpose, but did well for them.
Right. Yeah.
So that's very cool. I mean, you have to steel yourself. You can't take it personally. You've got to know that there's lots of reasons why people don't do things, and a lot of Hollywood is afraid to say yes because the person who says yes then has to deliver, and if it flops, then everybody in Hollywood is replaceable, especially in the studio system. The good news about the studio system is that every couple of years there are new people there. So if someone said no to you, 2 years ago, they're probably not there now.
Yeah.
You try again.
And all it takes is one person to say yes. But just keep that in mind. So you can have 99 people say no, but if one person says yes, that's all it takes.
It's and you say that so well because there is this again. It's the aphorism. It's the principle. It's that Edison tried 10,000 times to create the light bulb. You only have to succeed once. You only have to get it right one time. You only need one person to say. I mean, not that your life is done at that point, but the point is, doesn't matter how many times someone says no. It's when they say yes that things can happen, and you only need that one time. Does that make sense?
Nobody else is going to care about your project as much as you do, and you're the only one that's going to get it made at the end of the day. So, as much as you want to rely on other people to help make it happen, you have to be the one that's driving that train, and it's constant and nonstop. I hustled for years trying to get Dig Two Graves made. It wasn't something that was easy or overnight. It was years and years and years of you talk to one person, they say no. You talk to another person, and just right down the line. So
I'm going to ask you about that. I want to again have people ask questions. It's making so many really good points. Is it any bigger questions?
I mean, I have kind of a simple one because you said learn to keep in touch with people and just kind of what level of in touch, because obviously you can't hang out with everyone all the time kind of thing. Just is it we're talking send them a Christmas card, occasionally an email, what do you?
Yeah, and I think people always respond better when you're not just like constantly promoting yourself. You can check in and ask what they're working on, or congratulate them on something that they've done recently. Like that's you want to stay in the forefront of their mind. So you have to be a little bit subtle about pushing your own agenda. But if you can, just reach out and say, hey, I saw blah blah blah, way to go. I'm working on this. Slip it in there. Like that's probably the best way to keep up those relationships. But you don't want to just constantly be, promoting yourself, because people kind of can get annoyed with that pretty quickly. But yeah, it's the key. Just check in every once in a while, let them know what you're up to, and that's probably the best way to go about it.
You can email, you can phone call, a handwritten note. By the way, is a wonderful thing to do, because you took time to write it, or get a card and write something on it. Especially if someone's gotten some success or they've accomplished something, you can say, hey, congratulations on having your movie accepted in this festival, or congratulations on getting that job at the studio. In other words, when you are thrilled for them and you're not pushing your own agendas, you say, that's a great way to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Christmas cards, they tell actors every now and then, depending on the casting director, send in, postcards every now and then. But if you're just sending in a postcard with the idea that, of your headshot and your resume going, hire me, hire me, hire me, it's not the same as saying, hey, I saw that show last night, the casting was brilliant. That you really selected some fine actors for that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be on the back of the postcard with your picture on it. That's a much better way to stay in touch than to say, oh, I'd like to come back in again. When can that happen?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or if you're Facebook friends and you see something they've done, you can like it, promote it, that kind of thing.
That's a really good point, because Facebook is a great medium for meeting a lot of people. Yes, Steven.
What I'd like to add to that is Matt Haley, that graduated last year. He's in LA and he's working and keeping touch and stuff like that.
Matt Haley's actually in the Bay Area.
You what?
Matt Haley's in the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area. Well, he's in that area, so he's already going through it, and that's a good thing to keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, if you genuinely cheer on somebody else's success, your friends, your student, and other people who you get to know, and you're genuine, you're sincere. I mean, that's one of the nicest things you can do for somebody.
Yeah. And along those lines, I think just we discussed this on the actors panel, Rex, is having that digital footprint. Like you need to be on social media constantly, pushing out content. That's kind of the era that we live in. Even when you're not doing a feature film or some big project, you still have to be very vigilant daily about it to build your community online, so that when you do have a project, you've got this audience there that you can reach out to.
Yeah, the world has changed where now you will build your own audience far probably. That will be more important than trying to reach the masses. You will be appealing mostly to your own audience. I wanted to say something that you said earlier about, it's about creating content. It's about, doing quality work. It's about getting it out there and then utilizing social media to do that. But if you just do social media and you have nothing to show for it.
Right. You got to give people a value of some sort. And as an example, you guys know who Mark Maron is, the comedian.
Yeah.
Yep, we got heads. Yep.
Yeah, he toiled in obscurity for a long time, but had befriended a lot of comedians over the years, just from working in the industry, but wasn't really well known outside of that small circle. So he started a podcast a few years ago called WTF, and would have on other comedians, and they would interview them, and the podcast exploded. And since the podcast, he's gotten his own TV show. I think he's on Girls now. The guy's all over the place. So that's another way that you can, again, build your audience. He was giving people value by not promoting himself, but by promoting his colleagues.
Mhm.
But people found that really fascinating. They like to get a behind the scenes look at how these comedians worked and what their process was, and then consequently his career took off. So, there is no one trajectory that you can take, but if you can give people something that they can find value in, then that can be the best way to advance your career.
Excellent.
It's kind of an indirect way, but that's kind of the era that we're in now.
That's excellent. Yeah.
You said that it's not that hard to get a PA job, and most of the job that you get was from knowing people. Is there any other requirements to get a PA job? Or is
Are there
that
requirements?
yeah, I mean, like, is that just like from knowing people?
Yeah, I mean there are, and you may know, I forget what it's called, Rex, but there's some like bulletin that posts work.
There's like Production Hub, and there's
Yeah.
I think Staff Me Up. I mean, some of them, I don't know all of them. There's there are some industry standard job boards or email boards. It's like Mandy does a lot of casting and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are things like you scour those, look for work on that.
You can always go to the studios and put your applications in the HR department. You apply for I wouldn't tell you to apply for being a universal tour guide, on the tour, because that's that's like going to Disneyland and supposed to go into Disney Studios. But there are tours and tour guides at Paramount and 20th and and VIP tours that are useful. There are internships. There's mailroom. There's PA jobs. There's any number of things that you can apply to for the studios, as well as looking at these boards for productions that are in the area.
You know what else would be a great idea is find out who are alumni from the college, people that are out here working, and then either try and get in touch with them or have the university track down their contact information for you. But if you reached out to somebody and said, "Hey, I'm
An alumnus.
I'm an alumnus," the chances are they're going to be pretty open to helping you out, giving you a job or a suggestion at the very least. I know that's happened countless times with friends of mine. So if you're proactive and kind of ambitious, it can be tough to track down these people sometimes. But if you be persistent, be respectful and polite, but you also have to be tenacious. It's sort of finding that balance, but that can be a great way. Like find a job as like a producer's assistant, director's assistant. Those can be great jobs because you really get to know these people on a personal level, and if they like you, they can really help you as you start to try and develop your own projects.
Or if you're good at drawing, some of you may be very good at sketching and drawing and able to do storyboards. You can become a storyboard artist for a director, during the conceptual stage, if not hired onto the project. I mean, there's a number of different ways. Craft services, again, is another area if you can get into that was asked about. Any other questions, quickly? Then I have one. Going back to Dig Two Graves, you were going to shoot it in Wisconsin. You ended up shooting it in Illinois.
Right.
It became a SAG feature film. Not a non-union crew, but I mean, not that they weren't union, but that they may have been working non-union for you. Let me just stop and point something out because it comes up a lot. You see it a lot online, and that is independent film does not mean a no money film. A no money film means a no money film. An independent film is something that's shot outside of the studio system and can pay very, very well, or it can pay next to nothing, or it can be free. But I see a lot of stuff, like you'll see a Kickstarter campaign going, because we're an independent movie, we have no money. And that's not what an independent movie is. So just so that term is clarified to our viewing and listening audience and to our students. But so you raised money. You shot and you. So let's walk through some of the process of getting this feature film. You had done the one lower budget movie in Wisconsin, and now you'd up the ante. You know, with your talent and the people that you had, and you moved to Southern Illinois to shoot for a period of time. Take us through that experience. How you know, because this is sure what a lot of people would hope to be able to accomplish sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So once we had essentially the money in place, well, we had about half the money in place when we started to go full speed ahead.
Can I ask you just a quick interrupted question? When you say we, you weren't doing it all alone.
Right. So it was me, myself, and my producing team.
And so one of the first things you did was have a producing team. I mean,
right. And these were both people that I had met on Public Enemies, and they were both now working in Chicago and producing commercials and independent films and TV shows. So they had a very strong connection to cast and crew in Chicago. And since we were going to be filming in Illinois, in Southern Illinois, the idea was to bring down the cast and crew from Chicago. I initially wanted to shoot in Wisconsin. I wrote the film for Wisconsin, but they didn't have any tax incentives. So the producers insisted on Illinois so we could take advantage of the Illinois tax credits. So what they did was, we shot in January, and so there wasn't a whole lot going on in Illinois, in the film industry, because it's so cold. So we were able to attract a lot of really talented people because they didn't really have much else going on at the moment. The other thing that we did was we targeted crew members who, for instance, worked on big TV shows in Chicago, but maybe weren't the head of the department. So it was like, the assistant to the head of the wardrobe department, the assistant to the head of the production design department. So these were people that had years and years of experience, very talented, but were not given that, the key role in that department. So we were able to kind of empower them, and that's how we got them excited to do the project for next to nothing, essentially. So you can't pay somebody; you have to give them some sort of value, and that was what we were able to give most of the crew people. So it was a combination of that and the fact that there wasn't anything else going on, and they all came down to Southern Illinois, which is about 6 hours south of Chicago. And again, it was a case of it's connections. So my producers worked in Chicago a lot, and they were friends with a lot of these people. So it was so they were also willing to work because of these producers. They weren't doing it because of me, in other words. And so what else can I tell you?
well, what about the fact that you're an emerging director at the time? You're a first-time director as far as Ted Levine is concerned and things like that.
Right.
What kind of relational issues or what kind of challenges did that present, and how did you overcome anything if there were any issues?
Yeah, well, it was the same with Ted. It's the same with the crew. Like, you're an unproven director. You have to prove yourself to them. You have to get them on your side, and part of that is, is really going out of your way to befriend the crew. Like having lunch with them, having dinner with them, like not being standoffish. It's when the shoot was very brutal, and people were not being paid much, and there was no reason for them to be down there. So you have to give them a reason to stick around, essentially, and that's where it becomes about building those relationships and treating people well. You know what I mean? With Ted Levine, the reason he did the film was he said he had a set criteria that he looks at. One is the script, which he really liked. He felt the character was unique and something that he could, get behind. The second is location. He grew up in Ohio, not too far from where we shot, so he was interested in getting back to that area. And the third was who else is involved, the cast and the crew. And it turned out that there was a stunt coordinator we had hired that had worked with Ted in Chicago on a TV show, and Ted knew him. And so because he respected the stunt coordinator, he said, well, if Rick's going to do the movie, I'll do the movie, was essentially what happened. Of course, Rick didn't end up doing the movie, but Ted did. So yeah, it's tough when you don't have credibility. People aren't going to take you as seriously. With Ted, there were some difficult moments. You just sort of have to work through it, and hopefully he trusts, the crew and the cast trust you enough to continue, doing the film. But yeah, that's a very difficult aspect if you don't have that background and that credibility.
When you say the film was brutal, what kind of shooting schedule did you have? What kind of days and
It was we did 6 days on, 2 days off, and it was 24 total days. And what made it brutal was it was freezing. It was January, the coldest winters on record. We were in the middle of nowhere, very rural, and a lot of night shoots. So, when you're shooting all night and it's cold and you're in the middle of nowhere, it wears on you. It's exhausting. And on top of that, it was a very ambitious project to begin with. So, like I said, double period film. We're working with a child actor. We've got animals, snakes, gunfire, fires burning, underwater sequences. It's kind of insane. Yeah.
I produced a movie 5 years ago or whatever. I co-produced a movie and line produced a feature that shot in Florida, and that was brutal. And it wasn't. I'm just saying that movies tend to be brutal. For you to have all of those things combined, really puts a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and you end up, unfortunately, there's so much beyond just making the movie, just concentrating on the filmmaking aspect of it. There's all these other variables at play, and all of that is part of the process, but you really have to stay focused on making the movie.
That's fantastic. Now, I want to ask, and I'm sure there may be other questions, but I want to ask, because we were on the panel and we were talking about acting, and we were talking about acting to actors, and you said some things about how you like to direct and how you like to do a certain number of takes, and then you also did one additional take that was a special take, for you.
Yeah.
I really loved what you were saying. So would you explain some of your process
Sure.
to the listeners, viewers?
Well, the way it would work was we'd show up at the set, and the actors would arrive on set, and we would kind of block the scene roughly, figure out where kind of generally they were going to be. They would go get into wardrobe, makeup, and then I'd work with the camera team and the lighting team to set up, the shots essentially. And then actors would come out. We would do a rehearsal or two, and then we would start shooting. And because this is a thriller, there's not a lot of room for improv because you're telling a very succinct type of story. But I would always, after we do a couple of takes, just to kind of mix it up, I always have the actors do one take where they're not delivering any dialogue, so they're just expressing the scene physically. And almost always I found there was stuff in there that we ended up using in the edit. Reactions to things, and when you take away the dialogue, people then have to rely on expressing things physically, and that's very interesting.
Very cool. Very cool. How important was your script supervisor?
The movie would not have been made without her. I mean, it's so important to have a good script supervisor. Yeah. And her name was Sarah Schooley, and she's like the best in Chicago.
Very cool.
I recommend her, yeah.
So we've talked with a very good editor, Robert Hoffman, and friend, and unfortunately that audio, that picture is not available. He and I are going to do another session and get it up on YouTube, but a lot of people ask about on-set editors or early editors being brought on the process, and any thing like that for you?
Unfortunately, no. But I would definitely recommend it. I mean, I think the sooner you can get everybody from post involved, the better. So, but I like to get my sound team involved during the script phase, so that you can talk about how can we use sound to tell the story. How, what does this movie sound like? People do visual designs. They do storyboards. They do lookbooks. Very few people really spend much time discussing the creative use of sound in the script stage. So by the time, everybody knows you got to get good sound, which is, obvious, but they don't really think about it until they're already in the editing process and everything's been shot. At that point, it's too late. You're stuck with what you've got. Whereas if you're designing it ahead of time, you can actually shoot the scene in a way that's, maximizing the expressiveness of sound.
That's excellent.
And the intersection of sound and visual design. So you can get your musicians, your composers involved early on, get your editor involved early on, get all of these people collaborating before you shoot the movie. You're going to have a better movie. Things always change. That's inevitable. But you make a plan and then you throw the plan away. But the fact that you've made the plan means that you're thinking deeply about how to tell a story in cinematic terms, as opposed to just capturing talking heads. Unfortunately, on Dig 2 Graves, we did not have an editor ahead of time, and so we found somebody after we had shot the film, and we filmed on the Red camera, and I ended up having to convert all the footage after the shoot, and it was an absolute nightmare. It was like somebody had forgotten to sync the sound in the video, so I had to go through and manually find the clapboard and line up the audio and visual for every single shot. It took me 6 weeks of working 8 hours a day. So that was a nightmare. My suggestion is get your editor if you can. Get these people lined up before you shoot.
Excellent. We got about 10 minutes left. Any question?
Wait, I just have one. Great.
Anybody who hasn't ever asked a question want to ask a question?
My next question would be just difficulties in terms of location shoot.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. We had all sorts of problems. Southern Illinois is a gorgeous place, and I think part of what makes the film resonate are the locations. I spent about 6 weeks camping out in Southern Illinois in the summer, just driving around looking for locations. So they're fantastic, but they were very they weren't always production friendly, because it was such a rural locale. So there are things that you don't think about, like, hey, where are people going to go to the bathroom? Where are we going to set up lunch, dinner, craft service? How do we keep people warm? If it's January and we're shooting outside in the middle of the night. There are all these little things that just because a location looks cool, there's a lot of other factors that can make it extremely difficult to do what you need to do. One thing we ran into is when we got down there, there was a huge snowfall, and we knew that in about a week that snow was going to be gone, and we were going to go back to that location the way that it was scheduled. We were shooting that location, and we were going to go somewhere else, and we were going to come back in like 2 weeks. So we had the problem of, well, we're going to shoot part of this scene now while there's snow, and we're going to come back in 2 weeks and shoot the rest of the scene. There's going to be no snow. So how do we deal with that continuity error? So the morning of the shoot, we had PAs out there with hot air blowers trying to melt the snow. So there's a lot of those kind of factors that are just, they're out of your control, and you just sort of, you do the best you can. We tried to frame out the snow as much as we could. And if you look closely, I mean, you can tell that it's there in part of the scene and not in another. But for the most part, people don't notice. My suggestion would just be take those types of things into consideration when you are location scouting. What happens when 50 people show up at this location? Is it going to work beyond just is it a cool location?
And you should always go to the location at the time you plan to shoot, because if you say we're going to shoot here at night, and you're there at 2 PM, you don't know what the night is like until you're there at night.
Right.
So it's a good practice. Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering. You had said that somebody had forgot to sync up the audio and the visual. When does that normally happen on a bigger production like a feature?
Well, it's my understanding it's a simple thing that the sound guy and the camera guy need to just coordinate, and for some reason that was not communicated properly.
Oh, okay.
It can happen daily.
Yeah, so all the audio was recorded separately, and then from the video. So there is a very simple way just to make sure that those two things are synced up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a pain for me, but
Well, and were you budgeted to have 6 weeks of doing that?
no.
Yeah. See, I mean, now he's spending
That was
his
a big
time.
surprise.
Right.
The good thing was, while that was happening, I was also looking for an editor. So it gave me time because I knew that I wouldn't have this stuff ready to hand over to an editor. It gave me time to look for an editor. So that's a very important relationship. You want somebody that's obviously good, but somebody else that you can also spend a lot of time with. So I did a very extensive interview process, where I would meet with editors and we'd get coffee and we'd talk and, before I made that final decision.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Time for a question or two.
It's Stephen again. I
Hey.
was wondering, what was it like studying film living in Paris? Are you fluent in French, and why did you study there?
Yeah, mostly, I guess, it's the greatest city in the world to watch movies because they have cinematheques and theaters on every corner, and you can see every type of movie ever made. I mean, it's just a cinephile's wet dream. So it's a great place. I mean, I didn't study as much as I probably should have at the university there, but I spent all my time just walking around from cinematheque to cinematheque, consuming film. That's really where I caught the bug. So it's a great place just to go and absorb the history of movies.
Very cool.
In really ideal settings. I mean, nowadays you can find most films, and you can watch them on your laptop or your TV, but it is a totally different experience when you are in a theatrical setting, and you're seeing the movie as it was meant to be screened and experienced.
Well, my analogy for that is sometimes it's great to be alone, and you can throw a party by yourself, but it's a different experience than if you actually go to a party and there are other people and you're interacting and there's noise and all this. Same thing with a movie. I mean, it's so weird. if you've grown up in an age where a lot of people are growing up right now where they're getting most of their media on their phone or their iPad, or they're getting it in small doses from time to time, or even binge viewing, something that some of the older people in this country, who will someday long be gone, didn't have. We grew up having to go to the theater on Saturday afternoon for matinees and watching 2 movies with trailers and newsreels and cartoons. I mean, it was a huge event to go to the movies, and then you sit in an audience and you see things, I do live speaking, and comedians and friends of mine and stuff like that. If you're in a comedy club and there's one person sitting over here and another person sitting over there and somebody sitting in the front, and it's kind of sporadically, the energy is not the same if everybody's tight together and put together, for the performer or for a public speaker. That's why when you go into a room, if you're talking and people are sitting in the back but they're not up front, there's a different dynamic. So seeing movies, consuming media, especially feature films, where they were intended to be, at least for part of the last 2 centuries, is a very worthwhile thing. Don't just watch it on Netflix and in your bedroom, late at night. Go out and get to the theater.
If you can, that's the way to do it. And nowadays you're seeing, especially in LA, there are these repertory houses that are popping up where they are showing movies in these theatrical settings, like the Cinefamily, the American Cinematheque, film festivals, all over the country. People still crave that communal experience. It's worth the effort if you can do it. I mean, that's how you can really understand a film and its effect on an audience. Because films are designed for 5.1 or more. They're designed to be seen on a big screen. When you take those things away, then it loses a lot of the cinematic storytelling techniques. And then it's important to experience it that way if you can.
We're going to have to close out here, but I do want to address this and have you speak to it. The festival run, the afterlife of your production, because now you are in festivals and you are screening different places. It provides some insight into this process and what it's like. You've got a feature film.
Well, that's when the real work begins. Is once the film is done, and you have to start marketing it, promoting it, taking it out on the festival circuit. The biggest lesson I've learned is with festivals, even if you get in, which is difficult nowadays because there's so many films that are being submitted, you really got to do your legwork to get people in the seats. So you can't just show up at a festival and expect it to be sold out. You have to be taking the initiative to contact local media outlets, to constantly tweeting, Facebooking, letting people know what's happening. I recommend getting there at least the day before you screen. Bring postcards. Bring any kind. Figure out a marketing hook so you can get people to want to come see your movie and start to spread the word. Meet other filmmakers. Go to the parties, the events. And not so much to promote your own work, but ask them about their work, because as soon as you ask them about theirs, they're going to reciprocate and ask about yours, and that's how you get people to come see the movie because they like you. Like when I go to a festival, the films that I pick are based on the filmmakers I meet that I like. That's how I decide what films I'm going to see. So it's a lot of work. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line. It doesn't stop once you finish the film.
So out of all of this, you made a movie. It was 24 days, 2 days off, 6 days on. You had a pre-production period of time, which we'll call official pre-production, because you had production coordinators you were hiring, you were doing. You had a fundraising period before that. You had the script writing before that. You had the idea before that. You had finished a feature prior to all of that. Then you went into post-production. Now you're marketing. You got a festival run. Cumulatively, the years that you've been involved with this movie.
With this particular project, I would say 5 years.
So.
And that's probably average, I
Yeah.
would say. And some are longer, some are shorter, but it's years,
So it's 5 years, but literally probably 2 months that you made the movie, another month, maybe a couple months for post. So out of the 5 years, there's all the planning, the spending, the plotting, the marketing, the pushing, the funding, everything else to be able to make a movie for a month, to do post in a certain period of time, and to have pre-produced it in a certain time. That part of filmmaking is small by comparison to everything else you do.
And Orson Welles used to bitch about that. He used to say, you know, filmmaking is like 95% hustle and 5% filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. Unfortunately.
And fortunately, I mean, in the sense that you've got it done, you're going on, and more power to you, more success. You have been awesome guests to have today. I really appreciate it. It was fun being on the panel with you. It's been fun knowing you these years, and but I'm really glad that you could be here today and talk not only to the students but to the YouTube audience at large.
For sure. And you guys have any other questions or follow-ups? Hit me up. Rex can give you my contact information, and I'm on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all that stuff. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Well, you've been awesome. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day. I'm going to call you from my car in a little while, and just to debrief and to follow up with you. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.